Well, welcome to the $1 Million Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Tom Kelly with Charity Auctions Today. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Janelle DeRay, the President and CEO of Jobs for America's Graduates, JAG. Janelle brings over 15 years of experience in education and nonprofit management. Under her leadership, JAG has transformed more than 1.6 million youth and currently serves 78,000 young people across 1,500 communities. Join us as Janelle shares her strategies for scaling nonprofit organizations, leveraging data for success, and creating lasting community impact. Janelle, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Tom.
Yeah. So what inspired you to pursue a career in nonprofit management and education?
Ever since I can remember, I've been drawn to supporting something larger than myself, helping others in need, creating positive impact in our world. And that could look a lot of different ways, but I was always naturally drawn to that. I also knew that I figured out at a very young age that we're going to spend most of our time at work as adults. And I did not want to have a job where I didn't enjoy being at it. So very much focused on at a young age that my job has to be something I enjoy. It has to be a calling that is aligned to my passion. So that naturally brought me into nonprofit work. The bottom line is mission, right? Not dollars. So I do believe, though, however, that nonprofit employees and leaders should get paid their fair value. But nonprofit work attracted me because it's mission driven.
Mm-hmm. And with, the mindset of paying, a salary for, the member that is either volunteering or running the organization, how important is it to have that mindset that, hey, we should be paying these people because they're taking up their time? And, compare the salaried volunteers or workers in the organization to maybe a volunteer and the two differences between, the mindsets that some of these people that are starting a nonprofit for the first time kind of come in with.
Yeah, I think that it all depends on where you're at in your journey. If you have a full-time job and you're bringing in an income, but you launch a nonprofit because that's where your passion is, you're going to have to make calculated decisions and you're going to have to crunch numbers to determine when that is best for you based on what your needs are, your lifestyle, and then you have your board of directors. But even outside of that, you got to surround yourself with leaders who maybe have done this before and calculate the time for you that it makes sense to make that leap, if that's what you're considering. I'm a volunteer for this nonprofit because it's my passion. However, I'm spending half of my time there, perhaps even more, but I'm not getting paid. I mean, put the nonprofit aside. What matters to you and your livelihood and where your passions are? And I say this to our students all day, every day. Our first name is jobs. So we advocate for young people and we support them in developing the skills they need to enter the workforce and be competitive in the labor market. After that, I say, you got to figure out what your passion is and where your joy is and how you make money in doing that. So when it comes to nonprofit leaders who are trying to figure out that piece, come back to that central question of what brings you joy and how do you want to spend your time? And then work with other nonprofit leaders who have already gone through this journey to determine what a competitive salary is. And also be aware of your gaps, where you might need to be a competitive executive director in your industry, in the nonprofit market that you're specifically in, and then develop that job description with that salary package with that group of individuals who's been there before, and present that to your board. But even when you said volunteers and non-paid volunteers, I mean, we all will have that in the nonprofit world because there are individuals who support our nonprofit, our mission, who have full-time jobs, and they do this because they want to do it. It is their personal extracurricular that touches their heart, or it might be their corporate one because they have volunteer time off at their employer's place. But you got to be very mindful of when you're a near full-time volunteer executive director of a nonprofit. And it'll be a calculated approach. I would suggest a very calculated approach that has a budget attached to it when you make that leap.
Do you think there's a different mindset of when you have expenses, whether it be, for office space, payroll, you kind of approach fundraising and raising money differently than if you did not have those extra expenses that you needed to basically raise enough money to cover every single month, plus have enough left over to, support the mission and the people that you serve?
Yeah, if you're a small nonprofit, I mean, you're working out of your house, you're working out of your basement, and there's different types of funders who are going to support different type of work. You are seeing a movement in philanthropy around in awareness that it can't all be programmatic. Your costs cannot be all programmatic, because then you get into this situation where you're expecting more data. You're expecting more reporting. People want to see the outcome of their dollars, and they're their dollars. They have the right to ask for those things. Absolutely. However, in order to get that data, in order to protect that data and manage that data and communicate that data, that's all administrative work that the nonprofit needs to be able to pay for. You are seeing, again, more foundations, family foundations, who are keen on that, and they're aware of that. And they're saying, hey, if we want more nonprofit leaders and nonprofit services to be in the space, we got to appreciate the cost of a startup. And some of those overhead pieces might be a little bit more. And I would say, especially in a startup, it's going to be so lean no matter what, that's where, as a funder, you probably could be a little bit more comfortable with having a grant that's 30-40% overhead, because they're going to be lean already by nature of where you're at in your process. And then you're going to have those funders who will say, what is your overhead? We don't want to fund anything that's over 10%. And that's their right. You got to respect that. But I do see a movement and awareness around, if we want to have equitable approaches and ensure that nonprofit leaders have a chance, and we're continuing to create an environment where they're solving some of the big social problems and economic problems in our country, then we got to give them a chance to build.
Can you share the story behind kind of your evolution becoming the CEO of Jobs for America's Graduates? It seems like a fun, and I don't know how long the journey was, but it seems like you've kind of gone through all of the stages of the organization.
Yes, absolutely. And in your opening, I got to give credit where credit is due. So I've been the president and CEO for about 8 months now. So those 1.6 million young people who have gone through JAG are credit due to my predecessor, who was our founder when JAG was launched in 1980, and the thousands upon thousands of individuals who have supported our mission across the country and made this their job for their lives. But my journey specifically started about 14 years ago. I was an intern, and I was working with our founder on a few other projects. And JAG was in our office, but it wasn't the only company within our office. And when an individual left JAG for another opportunity, I was asked to step in and support an event that JAG was hosting. And I said, sure, absolutely, glad to do it. And immediately that calling my entire life of find something that you're passionate about, find something that is mission driven, find something that's going to support people and help people who might not always have a seat at the table. That itch got scratched when I went to that event. And then I fast forward a couple of months later, and it was what we call our National Student Leadership Academy. So you have JAG students from across the nation come together in DC. They're in leadership development workshops. They're meeting peers across the country. It's the first time most of our students have flown on a plane or stayed in a hotel. And I left that event and I looked at our then president and I said, you're stuck with me. This is what I'm doing. I love this mission. This is why I moved to DC. And just kept on taking on responsibilities. I'm sure a lot of your listeners know this story. Oh, I'll do that. Oh, I'll do that. I'll do that. Sure. We need to focus on fundraising in this area. We need to focus on programs, and I'll do it. I kept doing that until I think I became an executive vice president maybe 3 years ago. It was 2020 because it was COVID, and I had to steer the organization through the largest disruption we'd ever experienced at our on our 40th birthday. And then the board was kind enough to say, we have our successor. My founder was advocated for me and said, this is the right woman for the job. So never thought when I was at that event 14 years ago that I would be sitting in this role, but certainly honored and privileged to work on behalf of all of our affiliates and the 80,000 youth that are in our program today.
Yeah, you mentioned something that I've talked to hundreds of nonprofits, from the small ones to the large ones. And the ones that are usually the biggest and the most successful, they all have used interns. And it's funny that you say that, because a lot of the really successful ones, a lot of those interns have come in and become and still, employees of those nonprofits and still working there because they fell in love with the mission and they basically were able to utilize their skills. And I think a lot of smaller nonprofits don't realize that interns are such an untapped resource that they should be applying and putting job postings out there for anything, whether it's, marketing, social media, video, website design. People need the experience. Kids need the experience. And whether it's a free internship or a paid internship, it's definitely going to benefit you. But you kind of hit the nail on the head with, you just have to put the internship out there so that a lot of these kids that are like, hey, what do I want to do next, can kind of get involved. And I think once you're in the nonprofit world and you're seeing the impact that these organizations are having, like you were able to see, where you're like, hey, I'm stuck here. I'm here forever because I love your mission. I love what you're doing. A lot of people don't realize that they can get some really untapped gems and diamonds in the rough from interns that could stay for potentially long term, like you, and now basically run as president and CEO a very large organization. It's great. It's a great story.
Yeah, and thank you. And I agree. Something that we're working on at JAG is we have so many young leaders who are coming out of the program as high school graduates, whether they're going straight into the workforce or post-secondary education, or oftentimes a combination. We want to make sure that they're still honing those skills and developing those skills to make them competitive. So we want to build upon our intern program right now, because we have so many JAG students who, we want that. What a way it's like a meta version of our mission to empower the nation's young people with the skills and support to succeed in education, employment, and life, is bringing them in-house.
How do you prioritize and allocate resources within JAG to ensure maximum impact for the youth that you serve?
Well, we are going through a very robust strategic planning process. And when I say very robust, we're taking this year to do it. We're engaging stakeholders so we're a federated network. We have 37 affiliates. I think we're at 37 right now, primarily operating as state affiliates. And then they in turn have partnerships with local school districts, local charters, maybe other youth serving organizations to serve youth after school time. So when you're working like that and you have a federated network, you're a little bit more removed from your mission because we're not providing direct services to youth. However, that is our mission. That's why we were launched. So in terms of prioritizing, we have to ask our stakeholders, what do you see on the ground? What are you needing? What are you hearing? And then we have to level that against the market. So we have interviewed over 100 individuals who are in JAG, from our students to our affiliate leaders, to external stakeholders like employers and philanthropic groups, our board of directors, our national team. And we're seeing a lot of alignment in the areas that they want us to focus on. So that gives us direction on where should we be spending our resources, our time and money. And then when we look at the market and we analyze, so we're in education. And we are working with the firm. So we have the luxury of working with a firm on this to help do it, which is, I know for you new nonprofit leaders, it takes a while to get there. But I promise you'll get there one day if you keep at it. In education alone, the number was something like it was over 100,000 other nonprofits. I want to say it was like near 180,000 nonprofits in the United States alone focused on education. And then they brought it down to the 30 that were most aligned to our mission to just better understand what have they done in terms of scaling? What have they done in terms of prioritizing their fundraising? How has that worked? What is the market telling us? What are employers saying they're needing in this space? And then we balance what our stakeholders are saying at the local level, what our students are saying they need to see from JAG, what our affiliates are saying they need to see from JAG, and pair that against what the market is telling us is the need and bring those two together. So it's a very surgical process, actually, which I would say a few years ago, it wasn't for us. But once you get to that certain scale and maturation, you gotta take that stuff pretty seriously, and you gotta be competitive because it's all about the mission. And we know there are a lot of kids who could benefit from services like JAG. We know there are other nonprofits in the space that we can collaborate with. So we're getting a lot more clarity on how we spend our money based on the strategic planning process.
What are some of the key challenges you faced in scaling JAG's impact, and how did you overcome them?
I don't want to say money because that's what everyone says, right, in this space. But clearly resources, whether that's funding or not. But I would say, so let's stick with resources and then say capacity to implement resources, right? Or implement new services. So what we've seen a lot is capacity. And especially if you're a young nonprofit, you're a new nonprofit working towards that $1 million mark, your capacity is limited because you're probably a 1, 2, 3, you're a small person shop. And finding enough capacity in just hours in the day to deliver on the priorities is extremely difficult. And that is an issue for scale, no matter what. It takes a lot of discipline to just assess how you're spending your time. And if you want to scale, you will spend your time much differently. I've told my team that while I've been with the organization for 14 years, the way that I spend my time now versus how I spent my time 8 months ago is radically different. And I have to consciously work on that every day to ensure that as president and CEO, I'm spending my time and where it needs to be spent. And if you are interested and if you want to scale your organization and you really mean it, you're going to have to take a step back and say, what do I need to let go of in order to focus on the areas that are going to get us there? And then once you identify that what, then you can say, who is going to take that and go out and raise money to find that who, and then you get a job description too written for them. And then when you do that, take the time to find the right person, because you likely have someone in mind, but talk to other nonprofits and talk to other leaders, because they will likely challenge you more than you can challenge yourself, because we have blinders on. We know the work, you're in the program, you're doing it each and every day. And so often we don't have that external lens, and we need that. So to scale, it's capacity. To build capacity, you got to spend your time differently. And then you got to make sure you build capacity by offloading and delegating things that you used to do to someone else.
Yeah, I like what you said. It's who, not how, right? If you want to get the biggest impact at the fastest rate of speed, there's always somebody that knows and has gone through that same experience before that can get it done 10 times faster. And it's just finding that right person and being a little bit maybe patient while you're looking for them to find the right one to accomplish the result that you're looking for. But yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. I love that you said that, because I believe in that. Even in the for-profit business world, it's all about the who, not the how. I don't care how it gets done. It's just who is going to be the right person that has done it before and can implement it the fastest and get the result the fastest. And it's always a who problem, not a how problem.
Exactly. So, and they might approach it completely differently than you would.
Yep.
And that's probably what you need.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do agree with you on that, where you have to almost take yourself out of the mix, because you're right. We all have blinders on because we've been in doing the same thing for so long that it's hard to think almost sometimes outside the box in a specific situation. So yeah, that's a great tip.
And another thing that we tend to do is if we know something works really well, because it's our baby, it's our nonprofit, we've seen it work, that's why we want to scale it, is we tend to say, okay, we want to go from 10 programs to 20 programs. Well, you know what that means. That means do everything you're doing, just do it twice as hard. What if you wanted to go from 10 to 100? Then there's only a few pathways that will get you there. It forces you to step outside, because you can't just continue what you're doing to get to a 10x solution. You have to think of alternative approaches to get to that scale. And I mean, I'm taking this from a book I recently read, 10x is easier than 2x. So recommend it to others who need that shift in mindset to kind of give them the boost they might need to really think of scale in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Well, and 10x is better than 2x is a business book. But
Right.
all business books can be tailored to the nonprofit world. And I think a lot of people don't really realize that. Just like the book Who Not How can be tailored to the nonprofit world.
Same author.
Yeah, it's like, a lot of people, they just have to step out of their comfort zone, just realize that, hey, it's a nonprofit, but you have to think of it as like a for-profit business, because you need to have a return on your investment. You need to be able to have a good run rate for those months that you don't raise as much money to keep the lights on and keep people engaged. And you need to hire or attract the talent, whether it's free, volunteer-based, or paid, to basically move your mission forward. And you're going to have to be a good storyteller. You're going to have to really be able to share, your vision with them, because if you just keep the vision for your organization in your head, nobody's going to really see it. So, and that's where a lot of, I think, nonprofits fail is, the leader of the nonprofit or the founder isn't the vocal coach, I guess, of getting their mission and vision out there and inspiring enough people. And they just try to keep it in and do everything themselves. And when you try to do everything yourself, same thing in a for-profit business, most likely it's going to fail because you're going to burn out. And just like you said earlier, when you have a full-time job, but then you're trying to really do this mission, you have to choose between putting food on the table or supporting the cause. And putting food on the table is the one that always gets picked over the cause, usually 99% of the time. You have to think about yourself and your family. And, you have to, when you have a mission and a nonprofit that actually serves, you have to think about how can I generate as much impact and donations to kind of keep things going. So I love it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. My formal education, nonprofit management, and that's important. You got to know all of those pieces. But when it comes to professional developments, I often go to for-profit business books, business strategy, team building, like taking everything from there, because same principles. It's just one is about bottom line dollars and the other one is about bottom line mission. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's been some of the most helpful guidance I've ever gotten, is learning more about the companies that have really gone, well, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, all those things. And you will find all the alignments, all the guidance that you need in these books. It's just a difference between money and mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, in your experience, what are the most effective strategies for engaging and empowering youth in education and workforce development programs?
Meet them where they're at. When you talk to our JAG students, and we primarily meet our students through schools, right? So we have partnerships with schools, and JAG students come to class like they would any other class. But once they get to the JAG classroom, it's different. And we were created to work with young people who maybe they have challenges outside of school. They might have challenges in school, academic issues, but we often find that the reason why they might be suffering academically is not because they're bad at school. It's because the challenges that they're facing outside of school. And JAG is a space for them to come in and have an adult that has time to listen to them. And our education system, our teachers are working so hard each and every day, but they often don't have the time to provide that individualized attention to the students who need it the most because of how the system's set up. So our JAG specialists create a space in which they show up as they are and we listen. And once our young people realize that this is a place that they can be themselves, and by the way, we're going to teach you practical skills and provide you resources that are going to help you navigate life, like how to do taxes, how to buy a car, how to appropriately, get your own apartments or sign up for a loan if that's appropriate for you, all that stuff. And they're like, oh, well, these are practical things that impact me right now. And then you're going to help me get into the workforce and find a job that's aligned to my passion. Then they're all in. And when you talk to our students, they say JAG is like a family. And they often say, it felt like for the first time someone listened and didn't tell me to listen, but they actually listened to me. And then they are engaged in their community. They meet with employers. Once they say, hey, I'm interested in this, we bring that close to them by engaging employers who have career opportunities in their backyard that are aligned to those interests. And we're increasingly developing our leadership component of JAG, which has civic engagement, social awareness, and it's just that whole rounded individual. How do you feel like a part of your community and be a leading member of your community? And all that boils down to meeting young people where they are.
And what role does data play and metrics play in measuring and improving the success of JAG's programs?
I got to go back once again and thank our founder, Ken Smith, when he was tasked to create a program like JAG. They brought in the school system. They brought in employers. They brought in the state governments. And they said, we have to demonstrate if we're leveraging taxpayer dollars, if business owners are pouring in, if schools are engaged, we have to show that this works because everyone's putting some skin in the game. So we are based in data. Data is in our DNA. So when young people come in, we know they're eligible for the program based on the eligibility criteria that we have, which ensures that the young people who most need, want, and can benefit from the program are in it. We know their employment status a full year after they graduate. We know their post-secondary status. We know we have 37 employability skills competencies that they learn through JAG. We have a lot of data. And we work with a lot of different funding sources that require that of us. So data is paramount, because we have a saying in JAG, if it's not in the data system, it didn't happen. So I feel very fortunate that that was at the forefront of our programming, because now it's in our training, it's in our onboarding, and it's the backbone. I would say our students are our heart, but our backbone is our data.
Tell me a success story from one of the students that completed the JAG program. The most memorable.
There's several. Oh, I don't even know this young man's name, but he sticks out to me so much. It was just a few weeks ago where we had what we call our National Career Development Conference. It was only our third annual one that we've done, but we still had 1,200 students that came. So coming from across the nation, again, oftentimes first time they've traveled. This is where they compete in our employability skills. Oftentimes they've won at their local and state level, so now they're competing nationally. They're attending workshops hosted by employers. There's a college and career expo. They have a day in the city where they explore. And in that day is when they're tallying the votes, because we have voting delegates who elect their slate of JAG National Career Association officers. And I've learned more about our democratic process and how the Electoral College works through our students than anywhere else. Despite all the times I've tried to read about it and learn it, now I get it because of our kids. But when we were announcing the awards the final night of the students who placed in the competitive events, there was you can often see like students as they're saying 10th, ninth, and going through the different placements. When they say second, sometimes on the face of the student, you'll see like they get upset because they know that they're not first, right? But there was this one young man who was up on stage. And in this particular event, which is very not the norm, but there were only 3 competitors. So we all knew someone was going to place 1, 2, and 3 because it was a new category that we still haven't quite developed. So it's very small. So everyone was going home with an award. 3 competitors out of 1,200. This kid got second. And it was the most joy I've ever seen of anyone in my life. He was so proud. And this was in one of our out of school programs. So this is a young man who likely came back and got his GED. And he had his fist in the air. He was holding up his second place certificate, and he was just like, the pride that was coming out of him was just, it was just a great reminder of why we do this work, and that everyone's achievements look different. Everyone's wins look different, and we have to meet young people where they are and celebrate those wins. And when we walked off stage, our vice president of operations was there to shake his hands, and he said he was crying and giving kids hugs. And this is a young man, again, who probably, aside from the folks that were the students who were he was standing in front of like an auditorium of strangers, right? And my vice president said he now has that young man's picture printed and on his wall as inspiration every day. So I don't know this young man's name, but it was just one of those moments where, most people would be like, oh, I got second. And this young man, like, he can achieve anything now after getting that award.
Sometimes it's just that little bit of hope that somebody needs to really change the direction of their life. And it seems like this guy really, really got it.
Yeah.
That's great. What advice would you give other nonprofit leaders who are looking to scale their organizations and increase their impact?
I also tell my team this often, that in my role, the hardest part of my job is working on myself. So if you are scaling and you're growing a team, you're the champion, you're the face of that organization, you and your mission, right? So I always say I share this role with the students. But you gotta work on yourself every day. You gotta think about how you think. You gotta recognize your biases. You gotta recognize how you approach the world. You gotta seek to understand your team and your stakeholders and your partners and how they approach the world. You absolutely have to go above and beyond and move beyond just empathy, but also seek to understand and meet people where they are and bring them along if you want to scale. And that doesn't mean always digging into the work. And, that doesn't always mean 12-hour days, 14-hour days, 16-hour days. There will be those days, but it doesn't always mean that. It might mean what's best for you is to take a step away and disconnect from the work, to allow yourself new and fresh ideas, to reflect on that meeting that maybe didn't go so well and how you showed up in it and how you could have showed up a little bit better. But if you are going to scale to $1 million nonprofit and beyond that, and you are going to run that nonprofit, you got to be willing to work on yourself and have the tough conversations with yourself about how you show up as a leader and how you do what's best, not just for your mission, but also in that because it's easy to get burnout. It's very easy to get burnout. And if you work on yourself, you'll be less likely to experience that.
And this is going to lead into my last question. And I always like to kind of end with this. And you've gone from intern to CEO of a nonprofit. Who did you have to become to go from intern to CEO? And I know that question I just asked you it's right along lines, but let's talk about you personally. Who did you have to become to grow yourself and your skills to eventually run and be CEO of this organization?
So I'm extremely competitive. So I had to I had to learn when to check that and when not, right? It's not a bad thing to be competitive, but you don't know, not everything is a competition, right? So I had to learn to grapple with that and use it when it's appropriate, but step back from it. And it's more important to celebrate others. And I've never been one that I need to be on the pedestal, but I still like to win. It's more important to help others win. Collaboration. So that's probably a follow-up to competitiveness, right? I fell in love with JAG and I was like, I love it and I know it works. It's focused on what our country needs. It meets young people where they are and it changes individual lives and it has the data to back it up. So JAG was the best. Collaboration is important. Years ago, I wanted to hoard everything at JAG and, kind of be, I think, almost be an insular organization because it's the best. I'm sure everyone who's listening who has their nonprofits know they have the best nonprofit. I had to become a different person and embrace collaboration, seek to learn from others and how we can implement and integrate our services to better serve young people. And that's something I'm really excited about for the future is how do other nonprofits in our space, how do we open up the doors, look under the hood and support each other to have more residual impact? Because we're all doing this for similar reasons. And this is still a work in progress, but I tend to burn the candle at both ends. I'm very work focused. I grew up on a farm in Northwest Minnesota. That work ethic, like I have to be actively pulling back myself from it. So again, work in progress, but I had said, work on yourself, walk away from work sometimes and go take those walks to clear your minds. That is something that I actively have to remind myself of because it is just so easy to how I think personally, I like to associate my productivity to personal success. And it's not always productive if you're 100% in the grind. You're not going to be productive. So that one, still working on.
Well, and I think kind of in this role, setting your North Star of where you're trying to go for this year or the next 5 years and, really getting yourself to be competitive to reaching that goal is kind of what I'm hearing you say here is, having a goal, being a goal setter and being able to always have something that you can strive for. I'm very much like you where I have to stay busy and I have to see results. And if there's, multiple weeks in a row where we're not improving in some little way, it's very hard to be, for me to not get a little frustrated because I always like to see growth and momentum and just whether it's for impact or revenue or anything, it doesn't really matter. But as long as everybody's making an impact and I think kind of having those goals and really just being a visionary where you can, inspire the team to, constantly be going, aligning and going after the same goal will definitely help out in the end. So, but Janelle, how can people find out more about JAG, Jobs for America's Graduates, and how can they support your organization, whether it's with donations, volunteering, likes on social media? What's the best way to get involved?
Thank you for asking. So we have a brand new website. I'm very excited by it. Great shout out to our VP of Marketing and Communications, James Wall, for his great work here. It's jag.org, www.jag.org, Jobs for America's Graduates. There should be links on that to follow us on social media. We're at JAG National primarily on our social media handles. And all of our staff are there. If you have questions about specific areas and specific functions, reach out to us. All of our emails are first name, last name @jag.org. I'm very passionate about helping others in the nonprofit space. I have a lot of thoughts, a lot of lessons learned, I learn from my mistakes so you can make new ones is something my founder used to always say to me. So please absolutely reach out. And if you feel inclined to support our mission, thank you in advance, whether that's cash or in-kinds, volunteerism. We have tons of opportunities.
And one last marketing tip, a domain like jag.org, jag.org is awesome. Very
Yeah.
easy to remember, very easy to get out there. That was a diamond in the rough that you guys found there that was available. So good work on that. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Janelle, thank you so much for spending your time with us and sharing some of your wisdom. You had a lot of great key takeaways here that I know our listeners will be able to take away and implement. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. And to all the listeners out there, thank you for all you're doing for our industry to support missions across the country, probably the globe as well. Keep it up.
Awesome. Thanks, Janelle.